Most of us who make things do so because we want to make them exactly the way we want them. We want to be able to choose the colors and designs that we want, make them the sizes and shapes and patterns that suit our purposes. Kumihimo is one of those designs that can be a little tricky to figure out, but today in this special video for one of my patrons, I'm going to do that for you. Hi there, Sandy here. Welcome to another jewelry making video at keepsakecrafts.net. So Minky Choms has been my patron at the Creative Genius level for over 6 months now. And my promise to my patrons at that level is that I will design for you a piece of jewelry according to your specifications, colors, sizes, shapes, and everything. I'll make a video showing how to do it and then send that to you. Minky had a slightly different twist on this. She had a Kumihimo design in mind that she'd been wanting to modify for a while, and it was giving her some trouble, and she asked me to figure it out. So this is the Kumihimo design. It's pretty basic. This is 8-strand Kumihimo on a round disc, and the pattern is simply these 6 of the 8 strands all have the same beads on them. And then these 2, if we count them starting here at 1 and going to 8, number 1 and number 5 have different beads, some kind of fringe bead. These can be mini daggers. You'll see Minky's are nice beautiful teardrops. So what happens if you do an 8-strand braid like this? Once braided, this is what that pattern looks like. What you have here, if we start here, this is strand 1 and this is strand 5. Give it a quarter turn and we have strand 1 and strand 5 and so on. If you're doing this in big round beads, what it looks like really are flower petals that are nested. Now what Minky wanted to do was to eliminate one of these rows because she wanted her necklace to be a choker that would sit comfortably against the throat. So of course you couldn't have this row of beads sticking out. But it's not as simple as just eliminating a single row of beads. That's not going to work because you can see this was just 2 of our 8 strands of beads. So how do we figure out which ones to eliminate? If you are really good at Kumihimo and you understand the pattern very well, you might be able to do it in your head. What I had to do was make a sample. So what I strung were green, red, blue, and purple beads. And I strung 5 green and 5 blue on strand number 1, and 5 red and 5 purple on strand number 5, and I alternated. So I have green 1, blue 1, green 2, blue 2, all the way down to the 5th ones, and the same with the reds. And then I braided it, and I was able to see my pattern that I had 5 beads on each of these 4 sides. Now let's take a look at the ones that are in the same row. So let's start here. We have a blue, right? Yeah, that is the first blue that I strung on. So that's B1. Then the next one is a purple. And there's a purple here, so it's the second purple that I strung, so P2. Then we have another blue, and that looks like that's the 3rd blue, so B3. And then that is the 4th purple, because there's one over here. And then the last one on this row is the 5th blue. And you could do this for all of these. I actually went through with highlighters and looked at this side that starts with the green and said, all right, I've got G1 and then red, there's another red, so it's R2, and went through. That's, here you go. That one got buried in there. I didn't do a good job weaving or braiding, but it's the 3rd green and the 4th red, and the 5th green. You could do this with all of these, and you would see that the way the pattern works, and it makes sense that you're skipping one. So of our pattern of 4 different beads that make up a repeat, 1, 2, 3, 4, we need to eliminate one of them. And because these are alternating, we need to offset which one we eliminate from strand 1 and strand 5. Another way of looking at it, by the way, is to think of it from a top-down perspective. If you were looking at this down, here's the purple, the red, the green, and the blue. And this is what is in each row. So let's see. So red, green, red, green, red. And then purple, blue alternating, green and red alternating, and blues and purples alternating. So this kind of helps you look top down if you were to explode out those beads, and then you can understand the pattern that this is the row, or one of these rows is the one we want to eliminate. So that actually makes the pattern repeat more understandable. The repeat is 3 beads, and then we're going to eliminate a bead. Of course, if you only wanted to have 1 bead spiral around, then you would do it the opposite. You'd eliminate the 3 and have just the 1 in these positions here. To set up your Kumihimo disc for this necklace, you'll need 8 strands of cord. Your pattern of your focal beads will only be on 2 of the strands. The other strands will all have just the 80 seed beads. For this necklace, we'll be using 72. So on each of these 6 strands, you'll have 72 seed beads. You'll have 72 beads on the other strands, but it will be a different pattern. Instead of the white ones, these are kind of a pearly white, I have the blue ones, and that will give little dots of the blue throughout the cord that goes around the back of the neck. These solid groupings of blue ones at the beginning of and the end are what will give the length that will go around the back of the neck, and then these are the focals. And this pattern is exactly the same as the pattern down here, except that it's offset by 2. So here we have our 3 focal beads and then 1 seed bead, and this 1 seed bead will, in all of them, all of these single seed beads, because of the way we're going to do the pattern, will end up on one side of the braiding. So you'll have that flat spot that will sit more comfortably against the neck. So the pattern is 3 focals and 1 seed bead, and I've repeated that until I get the length I want. Up here, however, we offset that pattern by 2. So if we take 2 of these away, we're going to start with a focal, one of the teardrops, and a seed bead. And that's what I'm doing here, a focal and a seed bead, and then resume the pattern. 3 teardrops or focals and a seed bead, 3 focals and a seed bead for the same number of times. So there's the same number of these on this strand and on this strand. If you set up your Kumihimo disc this way, then you should get that pattern. So be sure that you count very carefully. Double check, because this is where all the work is. The Kumihimo itself, the braiding is pretty simple. This is where all the work and the designing happens, is in setting up these cords. Now you'll want to take care to get these teardrops. They are heavy and bulky and they tend to get in the way, so make sure you get those well wrapped up in your bobbin. I do about 6 turns, so we'll get some thread on there and then get pretty much as many of the teardrops as you can tucked away in that bobbin. It just makes it so much easier when you're starting the braiding. If you were using beads that are any bulkier than these, they are pretty bulky. If you're using any bulkier beads, you might want to get larger bobbins. So just wrap those up. Give yourself a little slack. There. Now they're all contained and everybody should behave themselves. The next thing you'll want to consider is actually at this point is what are you going to use for an end cap. I have a Kumihimo end that is about 1/4 of an inch deep, and it's kind of wide, so I'm going to make about 1/2 inch of braid without any beads on it before I get started. I've done an entire series on making Kumihimo, a 3-part series on making it with beads and without beads and how to finish it. I'll link to that, but I'll just give you a quick refresher. You're going to take the one in the upper right and bring it down. So down right, left up, turn to the right, down right, left up, turn to the right. And that's all there is to it. You just keep doing this. And I remember this by telling myself a silly little story that it's downright unpleasant when the seat gets left up, right? Downright unpleasant when it gets left up, right? As long as you have the muscle memory down so that you don't mess up your pattern or the direction you're turning it, this is a great just kind of sitting and hanging out thing to do. I often like to listen to an audiobook. And whenever you need to stop, I always leave one down and not finish the row. That way I know exactly where I'm at. It is possible to tell by looking at the configuration of these strands, but it's so much easier just to leave one down. If you have to set it down and walk away, do that. Keep going until you have enough plain braid to fill your end cap. All right, so let's add some beads. So grab your first strand. Whoop, hello. The shorter you can keep these, the better behaved they will all be. Pop out your strand. To add your first bead, I use my thumbnail, bring that bead over. Just one, you know, it's not your turn yet. And tuck it under one of those strands going across. If you're coming down, it'll be the one on the top. Now, if this is loose, it may want to pop over, especially as you're getting started. So I pull on this one and tug it, and you can see it tucks it under there. So just tighten up your tension. I want to get a Kumihimo weight. I think that might help that problem a little bit. But you just have to pay attention. Don't rush this part. Pay attention. Get each of the beads placed properly because it's kind of tough to straighten them out once you're done braiding. Repeat with the one that's going left up, tucking it under the bottom one on the side. And pull that to tighten it. Can you see how that straightens it out and makes that bead behave? And then the pattern stays exactly the same for braiding. The only thing you're doing is dropping a bead down and making sure it stays tucked underneath. Just keep tugging these. I'm constantly tugging these and making sure my tension is good, which is why, like I said, I think a weight would be good here. And if you come around and one of the beads pops out, don't be afraid to undo. Go ahead and unbraid, and then you return to the left until you get back to that bead that popped out and put it back in its place. Otherwise, it will be a hole in your design. And you don't want that. So you see, that is wrong. You want it underneath, just hooked on that thread that's going across. Here I am back again. I have braided this section of the side and I've just gotten to my teardrop beads, but before we get to those, I want to mention this. This is a Kumihimo weight. I just bought it and started using it for doing this braid, and I am impressed. Can you see just how beautifully even and perfect the tension is on this? I just am amazed at what a difference it made in the quality and appearance of my braiding. So I highly recommend it. It's only about $9 at Hobby Lobby, and it was 50% off. So for $4.50, it's a bargain. It weighs about 3.5 ounces. If you have problems with your hands, I could tell that there was extra weight on here as I was working with it. I don't have problems with my hands, but it could be an issue where it might make it kind of heavy, in which case you might want to get one of those stands, marodai, I believe it's called, to help hold your beads as you're braiding. But anyways, now we're getting to the teardrops, and you do them the exact same way you do the other beads. The only difference is that they are bulkier and a different shape. So there's two things you have to watch for. First of all, you, like the other beads, you want to be sure that they fit and stay underneath that crossing thread. And also you want to be sure that you don't let them pop to like the inside, because it is not easy to get them back out after you've done the braiding. So you just have to keep an eye on them. So there's that first one. And then here's one on the other side. If you've done your stringing properly, you'll be doing these teardrop beads in pairs. Either 2 teardrop beads or a teardrop bead and one of your beads that makes the dot, if you choose to do that design. So there, I'm just making sure they're both under there and they're facing the right way, and then I'll carry on. And I'll just show you. Let's see. It's just the same. So we've got these beads in between, the white ones. And there's just enough, the way this pattern goes, these white ones give you just enough space in between the teardrop beads, so it fits nicely. See, that one wants to climb out, so we'll just keep an eye on it and make sure. Part of it is that my weight isn't weighing because I don't have quite enough room between the table and the camera. So I'm just going to pull that with my fingers and make sure it's pulled down. One more grouping of white beads. And now we're back to the teardrop beads. So we got one teardrop, but because we changed the pattern a little bit, because we only want 3 teardrops and we want 1 empty space around the back, now we have this blue bead. So you'll know you're doing it right if if your pattern turns out that you have 2 teardrops, and then the next time the teardrops come up, you should have a teardrop and a 6-0 in your contrasting color. So just got to take a little bit of time to, now see how that one popped out? So what I'm going to do is go backwards. So we'll pull that out and go to the left. Pull that out, turning it to the left, and here's where that errant white bead is, and I'm just going to pop it back over, tighten this up, and that one popped out too. Once you get rolling with the teardrops, and especially when you have your weight hanging down, they will cooperate better. I actually had no problems with the seed beads popping off, I think because I was braiding with the weight hanging down and it just pulled on it enough that it wasn't an issue. Okay, so now we'll go back. So don't be afraid, don't be in a rush to do this. If you want your pattern to come out right, just take the time and make sure everything is right where it ought to be. Back it up if you need to, because unlike some things where you can go in and fix it after, it's not so easy to do that with Kumihimo. Some things you can do, but it's better to get it right as you're doing it. Pull that tight, get in there, Keep an eye on that one. There we go. And carry on. And carry on. Okay. Whoops. You don't need 3 or 5. Come on. Gosh, I was doing it so smoothly before, then I turn on the camera and look what happens. And once you get a couple of beads in the rows above, that should make those teardrops behave. So now you can see where that flat spot is going to be. That will sit nicely against the neck. And I will double check my measurement, especially since I have the weight on it. I wonder if that's going to change my sizing. I'll check the measurement once I have done half of the teardrop beads. So I have now braided half of my beads into my cord, and you can see here the pattern is working out the way I hoped it would, where we have this nice flat area on the back that will sit against the throat for the choker. And our flower basically only has 3 petals, so instead of that 4th one sticking out over here. So that's worked out very nicely. I finished doing the braiding on this necklace, but before I finish it, I need to do a little bit of work with the findings, because this necklace is going to be a choker, and it needs to be a certain size that cannot be any bigger, or it won't work as a choker on the intended recipient. So I have to do a little bit of math, which means working with my findings. I have these bead caps, and I'll have a link to them in the blog post and the supply list and down below that accompanies this video. And these will go really nice with this. That's going to be a pretty finish. These are the type with a hole, so we'll need to use an eye pin. Sometimes they come with a loop and then you simply glue in your ends. But these ones with the hole, what you do is take an eye pin. Now this is a pretty big hole, and this eye pin, if you put it in there, you see it moves around a lot. It looks like a good hard tug, and it might slip through. So since this is going to be glued in and not be particularly visible, I'm going to just wrap that around again. And that will be big enough that that is not going to be in any danger of slipping through the hole. So I'm going to tuck in my chain nose pliers and just make a 90-degree bend. Then put in my round nose pliers, go around and make a loop, reposition, finish the loop, and wrap that bit of wire around that little stem that you created with your chain nose pliers. Trim off that excess wire. Let's hold on to that loop. Use a second pair of chain nose to tuck that wire end in. And if you're not happy with the shape of your loop, just stuff your round nose pliers in there and give it a wiggle. And also you can pull it up so it's straight. That will just make that loop nice and round. I've already done that on this one and added my lobster clasp with a jump ring. I'm just going to add this little tiny piece of extender chain. If I was making a necklace made to be worn longer, then I would use a longer bit of extender chain. But this will just give the wearer a little bit of adjustment room, and you know, if it's not enough, if they want to wear it longer, they can always just add another piece of extender chain. But I figured if you're wearing a choker, you don't want a big long piece of extender chain going down in the back of your neck. So the reason I got all this together is so I can do this. And now I know how long that is. So this will be from beads, because we're going to glue this in such a way that that'll go right up to the beads. 2 beads on the other side. And this is 1.5 inches, and you'll find your findings, especially with Kumihimo caps, may actually take up that much space. That means our braiding is probably going to be a little bit long, but it's better to have it a little long than not long enough, because we can solve the little long problem pretty easily. Now, something interesting happened here, and I think it has to do with the weight, because I've never had this happen on a piece of Kumihimo before. This was that first bit of braiding I did. Now you can see this has the exact same number of beads, but I think because of the weight, it pulled out longer and stretched. I looked it up online and I couldn't find anybody talking about it, so I don't know exactly why. I'm going to guess it was because it's stretched. So before I finish this necklace, I'm going to take all these beads off and re-braid them without the weight to make it the right length. But in the meantime, I will show you how to finish, because both ends are finished the same. We want 13 inches of necklace total. We have 1.5 inches here, so that means from beads to beads we need 11.5 inches, or 5 3/4. And I'm going to measure this from here, because this is what the part that's going around the throat. So I'm going to kind of fold it that way. It's funny, this part with the teardrop beads didn't stretch, but this part really did. I'm going to deal with this end, because I'm going to, like I said, I'm going to re-braid that before I send this off to Minky. So 5 3/4 puts us right here. Looks like I want to remove 8 of my dark blue beads and all of the white beads that go along with them. You heard me say that it's better to have this too long than too short. That's because we can crush those beads with pliers and remove them. But I'm not quite sure how you would put them back on. I think you'd have to redo it. So what I have here is some paper towel and my pliers. And these are some beefy pliers with ridges on them, so they'll really grab onto these beads. So I'm going to start right here, and I'm going to cover this up because I don't want glass in the eye. And you can see. And I'm just going to continue around, crushing all of those beads, keeping it within the paper towel so that we're keeping all these little bits of broken glass contained. I know it seems like a shame, but it's really only a few beads, maybe 30 beads. And if you think about how many you get in a package and how much your time is worth, it's really better to, if you need a super precise size, to make it a little bit big and then go in and deal with the extras afterwards. Okay, so I've finished that. Let's double check our measurement. 5 3/4 is what we're going for. Very good. I think I might have a couple outliers here. When you're doing the crushing, try to just squeeze hard enough to break the glass, because glass is sharp. We're trying not to cut our thread. It may happen, and I'll deal with that in a moment. But you know, don't crank down on it. Just gently crush, if that's possible. Gently crush each bead. I did get some of my threads got a little shredded here, and I will show you what to do about that. Do be sure to clean that area very carefully so that you don't leave any bits of broken glass that might harm pets or small children. Wrap that up very carefully. Use a brush, not your hands, to sweep off your work surface, otherwise you'll end up cutting your hands. Now we will seal these threads and fit them inside our Kumihimo end, all at the same time using some E6000 glue. So I just want to trim off these extra threads and get them out of my way, because I need to figure out how much of this braid will fit inside my cap. So I think if I fold it back on itself, which is what I had thought originally, about double the depth of the cap. Yeah. So I'm going to cut this two of those. And coat the whole thing in E6000 glue. You can also use 2-part epoxy. I want to get this good and coated so that any and all of those bits that maybe got a little shredded by the broken glass and pliers are not going to go anywhere in your piece of jewelry. That might be a little long. Let's see. Got a clean toothpick, and I'll just use that to pack that in there. Okay, it's just a little long. Better to cut these things long and have to trim them than to not have enough. I'm going to put a little E6000 down in here. Pack that in there real well, and then leave this somewhere to dry completely. So just put it somewhere where it won't be disturbed. All the better if you fit a couple of beads in there. Depends on your size of your beads and the size of your cap, if you can do that. That'll just really make sure it's not going anywhere. Also try to make sure it's centered in there. For the other side, when I take this apart, I will make sure I have the same amount of beads on this side. So that'll be easy. I'll just measure this. So this length is 3 1/4. So I'll just measure this to be 3 1/4. This will be going off to Minky. I hope she loves it. And if you'd like to have me design a piece of jewelry and make one just for you, check out my Patreon page for all the details on how we can make that happen. Happy creating. Bye-bye.